Today's episode has been very much requested. I was asked to do an episode on dating your spouse. So I am very excited to be talking about that with you today. So the sort of subheading of this episode is how to create a relationship routine that is anything but. Because you know that I love a routine for any and all things. Because I think with a routine, we can prioritize and we can also build in spontaneity. So that's what we're talking about today. So let's back it way up to 2001 when I was actually still in college. I had gotten my offer to work for an investment management company at New York City. I was a senior at University of Michigan, go blue. And at the time, so many of us had competing offers from different banks and investment companies and consulting firms because the economy was going great. And the thing to do after college was go work in finance, even if you were not really interested in finance like me. But that is a topic for another day. So what these companies did was they would have you come back to their office for a sell lunch where they would try to sell you and convince you to join their firm. Can you imagine? And they were paying so much money. You'd get a signing bonus and get this salary like you could never have imagined. And then they wanted to sell you to come there. P.S. I was actually only ever going to consider the firm that I worked for. But nevertheless, I played the game. I went for my cell lunch. And guess who took me out to my cell lunch? It was my husband. My current husband took me out. So while he is 4 years older than me and we did not go to the same college, we actually met when I was a senior in college. And we started working together. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's kind of funny. I was a very serious student, but I also liked to have a lot of fun. And my boss at the time had never hired an analyst straight out of college. So me and one other person were hired to do this role. And she had never had an analyst from college. And she just didn't trust that we were going to be able to do any work. The other woman who was hired went to Princeton. She was brilliant. She just didn't trust us to do anything. So we had like no work to do when we were first starting. So I wasn't going to try and pretend I was busy. I had nothing to do. And so my hubby and I shared an office, and he kind of thought that I just didn't take the work very seriously. He was like, who is this chick? What's happening? Because he can be very serious at work. And then we got put on a project together. I was finally trusted to work on a big project, and I got to showcase my incredible focus and my writing skills. And then he immediately fell in love with me. I'm just kidding. He didn't, but he did start to take me a bit more seriously. So from there, we had developed a friendship. We would go out to lunch with the other girl who I had just mentioned and another guy that we shared an office with. And we started dating casually at first, and it turned into a clandestine relationship. It was not frowned upon to date your coworkers. In fact, they liked it because it meant you would work more, which we did. If you stayed past 7 o'clock, you could get dinner on the firm. If you stayed past 8 o'clock, you could get a black car back to your apartment. So we were highly incentivized to date people at work, to work all the time. This is Wall Street for you in the early 2000s. And, but nevertheless, my husband and I both wanted to be private about it because we didn't want it to impact anything at work. So we had this sort of scandalous secret relationship, which did make it feel more fun and a little bit sexier. So anyway, that was more detail than you probably wanted about how we met and started dating, but there you have it. So we got married in 2006. So do the math, friends. We've been together for 22 years and married for 17. And I am happy to tell you that the spark is still there. And which is why I think this episode was requested from me, because I think people in my world can see that I very much enjoy being around my husband. We have a lot of fun. We still have a great sex life. And that's what I want for all of you. Now, do not get me wrong. I feel it's important to say that, like all relationships, not every year has looked the same. Not every season has been the best season for us. I was going to say there are times we're annoyed with each other. Obviously, he's not annoyed with me because I'm perfect. But there are plenty of times that I get annoyed with him. So I don't want to paint a picture of something that is completely untrue and unrealistic, because that is just not reality. We are two human beings working through our own shit, raising two of the most incredible children. But what makes them incredible is their strong will, their independence, their strong opinions, which, not always easiest to parent those types of children, although they are super fun to be around. So it's not like this has been all roses, but I'm really proud of the relationship that we have built. And I want to share some of the ways that we've been able to have this great relationship and keep the spark alive for all of these 2 decades later. Okay. So you should know that I love love. And you've heard me talk before that I love listening to erotica, but believe it or not, I actually love it as much for the romance of it as for the sex of it. Like I love romance, and my husband does too. And so we have made our love story a priority. And I recently read this quote from Joni Mitchell. It's actually not her quote. I couldn't find where it originally came from, but she was quoted referencing an interview in Esquire magazine that she had seen that said, if you want endless repetition, see a lot of different people. If you want infinite variety, stay with one. And that feels pretty sexy to me. Now, I am not going to go into a whole TED talk on find a partner for life, get married. That's not what this is. But I do have a partner for life. And so that is my reality. And so for those of you listening, I think it feels really sexy. If you want infinite variety, stay with one. So the pieces that I am going to share with you in a bit on how you can create a sexy routine really lie on the foundation that you have a partner that loves and respects you, and that you love and respect. And these other pieces really need to be built on a very strong foundation. Everything I have shared in past episodes teaches you how to work as a team so that you can eliminate resentment, so that you can eliminate fatigue, so that you can eliminate or at least reduce the bickering. Because so many of these things break down a relationship, even if you do have that love and respect. If you don't have that love and respect, I would just ask yourself, is that fixable or not? Assuming that it is, go back and listen to those past episodes through this lens of like, this can actually make my relationship better, because it truly can. Imagine looking at your partner and them looking at you with no resentment, without feeling like you're against each other. Like, you're a team. And if you can eliminate these things that break down a relationship and really know that you're in it together. My husband and I, we wrote our own vows, and in it we said, like, it's just you and me playing catch. Whatever is I don't even know how to throw a ball. I don't know how we came up with that, but no, I love the metaphor. Like, whatever is happening around us in the outside world, it is just the two of us playing catch. Sometimes it's the two of us against our kids, if you know what I'm saying. right? The two of us against the world. So really, before we dive into like the dating and the sex stuff that I'm going to be talking about in a minute, take a minute to see if you need to reevaluate any of those other pieces that might be standing in the way, because the tips I'm going to share are only going to work if you have eliminated some, not all of that, sort of like resentment that can build up, because some of these things will do that as well. But really go back and say, like, if my partner was helping out more around the house, or if I were more direct and transparent with an ask, would it feel more fun to have a date night with them? So when I talk about getting organized for good, it doesn't just mean good as in forever. It's good in terms of all of the good that you can invite into your life. And this is what I'm talking about. All of the amazing relationship benefits that come from getting organized and getting your partner on board. Okay. So if you listened to last week's episode, I hinted at this bean jar. And I want to share that as my first tip. And I'm also going to share some other actionable tips on how you can date your spouse and really create a relationship routine that, instead of feeling monotonous, actually feels fun and exciting. So as you know already, I'm 100 years old. So when I was first working after college and I was working in finance, it was before the Me Too movement. It was at a time where we would go to strip clubs for work. It just was part of the culture. I was not offended by it. It was what it was. And so I need to give you that context for this next conversation, because otherwise, no boss can have this conversation with no male boss could have this conversation with a female employee these days. But back in the day, it was like, whatever. So I was working for a real estate investment firm in Boston, and I was engaged, and my husband and I were about to get married. And the CEO of this company said to me, he's like, I want to give you a challenge. Every time you have sex, the first year of marriage, put a bean in a jar. The next year, every time you have sex, take a bean out of the jar. You'll never get all the beans out. And in any given year, you will never be able to get all the beans out, like in 1 year. The amount of sex you have that first year, you will never recreate. So I'm going to tell you what happened. That first year, hubby and I were like, it's like, now that we're like counting how much sex we're having, we were like all in. We were like committed to getting as many beans as we possibly could. And we got a lot of beans. And guess what, friends? The CEO was right. Bet that wasn't the outcome you were expecting. We've never had as much sex in one given year. But what it has done is it has given us a framework for thinking about what life was like when we were, how old was I when I got married? 27, and my husband was 31. And every time after we have sex together, whatever you're doing on your own by yourself doesn't get you a bean, if you know what I'm saying. When we have sex together, you get to put a bean in the bean jar. And when I say on your own, I mean by yourself. We are in a monogamous relationship. Not that there's anything wrong with not being in one, but I just feel like I need to clarify that piece. Talking about masturbation, okay? I'm just going to say it. So there is no ambiguity there. So you don't get a bean for that. Go on with your bad self. Enjoy yourself, whatever you want to do. You're not getting a bean for it, is the point. You are only getting a bean for sex together. So, our anniversary is September 16th. So at the midpoint of the year, we'll take the beans out and we'll count them. And we're like, what are we on track for? We have a minimum amount in our mind that we are committed to sticking to every year. We've never gotten to our maximum, but we've gotten to our minimum. And for us, this is really fun. Because listen, hubby travels, I travel, kids stay up later now. Like, there's a lot, obviously we've had 2 kids. Like we've lived a lot of life in these 17 years of marriage. And so, when you're first married and you have no kids and we were working at the same place, no, at that time we weren't still working together, but catch my drift. It was a lot easier. So obviously life gets in the way, but having a good quality sex life, but also there's a quantity to it that we want to make sure we are doing. This keeps us accountable. Now, this bean jar is not going to work for you if you don't have a great relationship already. It could start to feel pressureful or not fun. For us, it feels really fun. And I shared this inside my membership, and one of our members gifted this bean jar to her husband for Valentine's Day, and he loved it. And they said it's been working epically well for them. So this can be super, super fun. And it is a way to keep us accountable, keep us on track. Cause like anyone, I get tired. I just shared in last week's episode, like I try to go to bed early. So my husband and I are not always going to bed at the same time. We're not always waking up at the same time. We're not always showering at the same time, if you know what I'm saying. So sometimes you have to really make an effort to make it happen if you are wanting to make sure that you're doing it a certain amount of times. And we find that this bean jar really works for us. So in our master bathroom closet, we have a canister of dried beans, one that says to do and one that says done. So we literally take a bean out of the to do jar and put it in the done jar. And then we will routinely count them, see if we're like on track, see where we might need to make up for lost time. And it actually ends up feeling really fun. So that is the bean jar story. Okay. The next piece is we make sure that we have a date night, just the two of us. This is not a double date. This is not a group thing, just the two of us once a month. And I have to tell you, like the sweetest thing ever. So my husband and I did long distance for how long? A year, 2 years? He moved up to Boston while I was still living in New York. So we did long distance. I think it was just a year. And when I moved up to Boston, he gifted me with what we call our date journal. And it was for Valentine's Day. He had gone back through his credit card statements to determine the exact dates and places of every date we had been on. And he filled up this journal with a date journal. And we have kept it going ever since then. So every date we've ever been on is in a date journal. Actually, on our second date journal, they're just short little diary entries of the dates that we've done. And it's so sweet. And this is like our love story in a diary. And so knowing that we have this date journal, and every month at a minimum, we want to put one date in there, that keeps us on track to do our date night. So we make sure that we schedule them out in advance. And for some of you, you might be thinking like that feels completely unrealistic. And others of you are like, once a month, we go out to dinner once a week. So like with everything I share all the time, do what works for you. But this has been really great for us. And listen, sometimes I'm not in the mood. I've already shared many times, like I'm a homebody. I like to be in cozy clothes. I like to stay in my house and do nothing. So sometimes, putting on clothes and getting myself all done up doesn't feel exactly like the thing I want to do. But I love sitting across the table from my husband, drinking a dirty martini. And obviously we'll talk about the kids a little bit. We don't have a no talking about kids rule, but it's really an opportunity to catch up on non-logistics, non-kid related stuff. And it's so fun. Okay. So we've talked bean count. We've talked regular date nights. We've talked about the date journal. I will bring up again this idea of romance novels. I think for those of us that are not, like who don't find them off-putting. I know some people do. And you're just never going to get into them. I see you. These are not for you. But for those of you who are a little bit curious and a little bit open to it, they really can get you in the mood for love and in the mood for sex. So I am a big fan of if you're feeling like you just are in a lull. Yes, there could be some resentment issues like we talked about before. There could be some hormonal issues. Go back and listen to last week's episode. So a lot of the tips in there will help you feel like your more vibrant self physically, because I know that factors into it. But obviously hormones and age, and there's other things that can factor into this. And that's not the topic of this conversation. This is really about how we have a relationship routine, but romance novels really can get you in the mood. I also love flirting. I was a big flirt back in the day. And I think one of the sad things that happens to many people when you are in a long-term monogamous relationship is that you lose that flirting. And my hubby and I try to keep that alive and well. Sometimes the kids are like, what are you doing? Because sometimes our banter to them, they just don't quite get it. I like to rag on my husband to flirt with him. And, but we still have this flirty, fun vibe, and not all the time, obviously. Hello, real world. But we still like to flirt and have fun. And a piece of that is sexting. We will often sext each other. I mean, there's a lot of eggplant and peach and fire emojis and the spicy peppers that go on between the two of us. And sometimes it's just as simple as like, let's hang out tonight. But I think it's fun, and give it a shot. I'm so curious, if you've never done any sexting, how your partner would respond if you do it. So I'm going to give you a little assignment. If you're not a sexter, test it out and then shoot me a DM and let me know how it goes. I will keep it confidential, but it can be really fun. Just bringing some of that playfulness back into our lives is so important. It's like that Joni Mitchell quote. If you want to have infinite variety, stay with the same person, because you can start experiencing all this stuff over and over again. The problem is most of us don't. Most of us just fall into a rut and we take each other for granted. We get tired. Our spouses see us at our literal worst. They see us at our ugliest. They see us at our most disgusting, or maybe that's just me. But I'm not trying to like be my best self all the time in my house. So it makes it even that much more important that we get dressed up for date night, that we send each other flirty and fun texts, and that we make it fun. And my final tip for you is to create a sexy playlist, something that's going to get you in the mood. And I am going to do you a solid and drop you our sexy playlist into the show notes. So make sure to hop into the show notes if you want to download that Spotify playlist. So it'll be gritandglam.com/blog/episode 14, or just if you're wherever you're listening to this, you can just go below in the show notes and I'll drop a link to our Spotify playlist, because some good music can really get you in the mood. So the big takeaways from this, aside from go get organized so that you have more time and energy and less resentment to date your spouse, but really the big takeaways from this are having a fun, flirty relationship is built upon mutual respect. And the more organized you get, the more you unlock the ability to lean into this fun. And as a recap, we do the bean jar, we do regular date nights and the date journal, which you can start today. I routinely listen to romance novels. I have played some scenes because I oftentimes listen to them, as you know. I've played some scenes for my husband to listen to. Get your flirt on, get your sext on, sext with a T at the end, and listen to the sexy playlist. So I will be so curious to hear from you, which of these things that you take on. And I always love to hear from you. So shoot me a DM. And I want to remind you that I would love to see you at my Get Organized for Good workshop. One is happening on May 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern. One is happening on May 21st at noon Eastern. They are totally free. Do not come to both of them because you'll be bored, but you're welcome to register for both. I will drop the registration link in the show notes, but it will be gritandglam.com/workshop. And I can't wait to see you there.